axes. This is my vertical axis, which is my y-axis, and this is my horizontal axis, which is my x-axis. So that's very important. Y-axis, sky, and y go together. So the y-axis reaches to the sky. The x-axis is the horizontal axis. So it goes from left to right across the page. The y-axis goes up and down. So what I need to do is I need to put in my scale. And what I do is I'm going to use the squares to guide me on that. So if you can see, I'm just making a little mark along every square. I'll put the scale in a minute. It's really useful to have the squared paper. We didn't always used to have squared paper, but having the squared paper now makes a big difference in terms of drawing graphs. So make sure you use a ruler and a pencil, and that you use your squares in your copy, if you still have a square copy, to draw that. Now obviously in the exam you won't be asked to draw because you can't draw on a form. Now if you notice the plus y values, a bit like a lift in a shopping centre, the plus y values are above the ground. So going from 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, from here up, this is 0 on the y-axis, and this is the negative one. So we're going below ground now in our lift, and we're going down from -1 down to -9. And then the plus x values, like in a number line, the plus x values are on the right hand side of 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and the minus x values are on the other side. So some of you will find that straightforward. There's always some people that find drawing the graph very hard, so don't worry, you will get better at it as you try and as you practice. So some of you during the week will have been able to play battleships, because you'll have been able to either make up your own battleships cards or make up anyway some way of playing against your friend. So if you remember, in battleships and in coordinates, each point, let's just put a point in here. Here's a point somewhere on my coordinate plane. Each point has an x value and a y value. So let's call that point A, and we'll write them out over here. I'm going to move those guys. So point A, we have to look for the x value here, which is 5, and the y value here, which is 6. So that point A is called 5, 6. Let's give another point here, point B. So we've got B is 9 on the x-axis and 2 on the y-axis. So that's 9, 2. So each point has an x value and a y value. Let's make this point here, down here, point C. So C is 3 on the x and -7 on the y. And say over here, point D would be what, -6 and -2, and point E, we'll put one here, let's say up here, point E, that will be -1 on the x and 8 on the y. So if I was to plot this point here, we'll call it F. Hopefully you can see from my scale. Just work out in your head now what the name of that point is and the name of point G. Think to yourself there. And then some weird points like this one, point H, this point here, point J, this point here, point K, and let's say this point here, point M. So just in your head, hopefully you've worked out what they are. So I'll go through them now. So point F is going to be what? Point F is -3, 4. Hopefully you got that right. Point G here is 6, -4. Point H, now these points are weird. H and K are both weird because they're both on the x-axis, and any point on the x-axis has a y value of 0 because they're 0. Do you see that on the y? So it's on the level of the x-axis, the y value is 0. So point H is 4, 0, and point K is -4, 0. And then what else did we have? We had M and J. So M is on the y-axis, so it's got a point 0, -5, and point J is the point 0, 7. So if you can see that, hopefully you worked that out yourselves. If you have any questions, ask me now in a second. Can you see that? Any questions at this stage? Okay, so any questions? Okay, so what I'm going to do now, I'm assuming now at this stage that you have how to plot the points and how to read points off from the axes. And then the other two things we did was to introduce you to two formula we're going to use. Okay, so one formula was finding the midpoint of a line, which is the point halfway between 2 points. So let's take two of our points here, and it doesn't matter which ones we choose. Let's choose two that are quite close together. So there's 2 points A and B, and looking at that, it's about 4, so the midpoint should be, sorry, it's about 3 centimeters distance. Let's go back to here. So it's about 3, so the midpoint you'd expect to be about here. So it looks like the midpoint of AB is here. It looks like the midpoint there, what we reckon, 7, 4, but we have a way of working it out so that we can be absolutely sure. So what we do is we take point A, and there's a video on this on the channel. Point A is 5, 6, and point B was 9, 2, and these are the 2 points that we're finding the midpoint of. Now, you will be told these formula, and you'll be told the formula for the slope, but let's just think about them first of all. Okay, we're trying to find a point that's halfway between these two. The A value was 5, 6, and the B value was 9, 2. So what I'm asking you is, what number is halfway between 5 and 9? What number is halfway between 5 and 9? So let's just think about that. 5 and 9. What number would be halfway through? And hopefully you can see that the number that's halfway between the two of them is 7. And between 6 and 2, let's do that one under here. Hopefully you can see the number that's halfway between 6 and 2 is 4. Now if you can't see that, don't worry, because we can use the formula. But you can see that's what we're doing here, is we're finding the point that's halfway between. I could actually find the halfway point between 5 and 9 by adding them together and dividing by 2. And between 6 and 2 by adding them together and dividing by 2. And that's what I'm doing here. So using this formula, if you can get into a system of using this kind of way of approaching these questions, the way I'm going to do it now, it will be really helpful to you, especially if you find this challenging and you find maths hard. If you can try and be very methodical in how you do this. So what I'm going to do is, if you notice in my formula, it has x with a little 1, which we call x1, and x with a little 2, which we call x2, y with a little 1, which we call y1, and y with a little 2, which we call y2. Okay, and each of these points, if you remember, has an x number and a y number. So what we do is we say in our first point, our number 1 point, we call the x x1 and the y y1, and in our number 2 point, our second point, we call the x x2 and the y y2. Now if you can get that into your heads at this stage, you will find coordinate geometry not very hard at all. So get into your heads that each point has an x value and a y value, and in each point the little number here should be the same for each point. So if this is a point and this is an x1, the one that goes with it in the brackets with the comma is a y1. So each point has these roundy brackets separated by a comma. This is the x number, this is the y number. If this is x1, this is y1. If this is x2, this is y2. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to write down my brackets, because my answer is going to be in brackets because it's going to be a point. I'm going to draw the same as I have here. Now x1 was 5, so it's going to be 5 plus x2 is 9, and that's always a 2. And then y1 is 6 plus y2, which is 2, and that's always a 2. So x1 is 5 plus x2 is 9 over 2. y1 is 6 plus y2 over 2. So what I have here is 5 and 9 is 14 divided by 2, and 6 and 2 is 8 divided by 2. So that's going to be 7, 4, which is what we read from our diagram anyway. Okay, so have a think about that for a moment and see whether there's any questions you want to ask me. Okay, so I'm recording this and I'll post this online after, and you can have a look back over it. Any questions at this stage? Okay, so let's take two other points here and we'll work those out. So I'm just going to draw them in here. Let's take F and C. Now that's going to be harder to see. It looks like the midpoint's going to be somewhere around here, but we'll look and see. Okay, so F is the point, so we're trying to find the midpoint of FC, and F is the point minus 3, 4, and C is the point 3 minus 7. Now remember, our formula says that the midpoint is x1 plus x2 over 2 and y1 plus y2 over 2. Okay, so let's label our points x1, y1, that's what F is, and C is x2, y2. Okay, so how am I going to do this? My midpoint is going to be, remember, I draw my brackets, I draw my fraction line in both of them, and then it's x1 plus x2, so minus 3 plus 3 over 2, and y1 plus y2, 4 plus minus 7 over 2. And this is a quick reminder of your integers. Minus 3 plus 3 will give me 0 over 2, and 4 plus minus 7 will give me minus 3 over 2. Now remember, in this exam coming up, this test, you're allowed to use your calculator, so it's very important you get used to using your calculator now at this stage. Maybe not so much for things like this where you're adding, but on some of the questions involving percentages or involving decimals, make sure you know how to use your calculator. So this becomes 0 divided by 2, which I hope you know, if you've got nothing and you divide it by 2, you still have nothing, and minus 3 over 2, which is minus 1.5. So the midpoint of FC is 0 minus 1.5. Let's just look up here and see. Does that make sense? Well, actually, it's not a bad, maybe it's actually here, which would make sense. 0 on the x-axis and minus 1.5 on the y-axis. Any questions on that? Okay, so let's go for the last thing, which is today's thing, which is slope. And I'm going to talk about it on the graph first. And then what we'll do is we'll work out how to use the formula. So slope, if you think of slope, actually let's write it over here, we'll come back to the graph in a minute. If you think of slope, what I normally say if we were in high school now in B26, what I'd be saying to you is think of the path from the hockey pitches up to the new artificial pitch, the new rugby pitch. That's a steep slope, isn't it? You have to work quite hard to get up that path because you're going up quite quickly for every bit you go along. So say this is the hockey pitch, and say this is the rugby pitch. What you're doing is you're actually going up quite steeply like this. And it feels like it's quite hard work because what's happening is you're going up quite a lot for every bit you go along. So this is where we're going up, which we call the rise, and this is where we're going along, which we call the run. Now if you think of the path from Rathmines up to Rathgar, okay, the path from Rathmines to Rathgar, if you've ever had to walk that, actually doesn't feel too bad at all. In fact, you'd almost not notice that there's a slope at all, but there is a slope. If you've cycled it, you'd probably notice. There is a slope from Rathmines to Rathgar, and it's a much smaller slope, because what's happening is for every bit that you're going up, you're actually going along a lot more. So the amount we go up, our rise, compared to the amount we go along, our run, is much easier. So this is a steeper slope, okay, and this is a gentler slope. And I know which one I prefer to cycle up. I prefer to cycle up this one rather than this one. But on the other hand, I'd probably prefer to ski down this one than ski down this one, because this will be more interesting and exciting. So this is a steeper slope. Now, if we wanted to compare the two with numbers, what we need to keep in our heads is that it's all about how much do we go up or down compared to how much do we go along. And the bit that we go up or down is called the rise, and the bit that we go along is called the run. So we can compare slopes by comparing what fraction we get when we compare rise over run. So take this guy here at the hockey pitch. How much does this person go up? How many squares do they go up? To get from here to here, how many squares do they go up? They go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 squares up. And how many squares do they go along? 1, 2, 3, 4, actually 5. So that has a slope of 1. It has a slope of 5 over 5, which is 1. So in other words, for every step they go up, they're going along a step. For every step they go up, they're going along a step. For every step they go up, they're going along a step. Every step they go up, they're going along a step. Every step they go up, they're going along a step. It's like a set of stairs. It's got a slope of 1. Okay, what about this trip from Rathmines to Rathgar? Again, it's rise over run. So let's see for this person. For every step they go up, they're going along 1, 2, 3. For every step they go up, they're going along 1, 2, 3. For every step, now obviously my diagram's not great here, for every step they go up, they're going along 1, 2, 3 roughly. So the rise here, the slope is going to be the rise over the run. So it's going to be 1, 2, 3. They went up 3 in total, and they went along 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Almost 11, let's say 10, they went along 10. So this has a slope of 3 out of 10, and this has a slope of 1. And we know that 3/10 is much less than 1. 3/10 of a pizza is much less pizza than 1 whole pizza. So this has a more gentle slope. So if you can try and get into your heads that slope means rise over run, it'll make it much easier. So let's just look at this on our diagram. Let's take the 2 lines we drew here, AB. Now, actually, no, let's take lines that are going up first of all, so from left to right. So let's take line FE. So FE here, if we start here, this has got a rise of 1, 2, 3, 4, a rise of 4, and a run of 1, 2. So the slope of FE is rise over run, which is 4 over 2, which is 2. Okay? Now, if you remember the other 2 lines over here, they were all going uphill from left to right. And a slope that goes uphill from left to right is called a positive slope. If you notice, we had positive numbers when we did our answer. So uphill from left to right is a positive slope, and over here our slope was uphill from left to right, and it's also a positive slope. Okay, now let's take F to C. If you notice, it's going downhill. If you started at F and ended up at C, which we have to do because we're going from left to right, you can see we're going downhill. So a downhill slope from left to right is a negative slope. So downhill slope from left to right is a negative slope. Let's see what the slope of F to C is going to be. Let's see, it's going down 1, 2, 3, 4. Sorry, let's do that so you can see it better. Sorry, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. It's going down 11. So its rise, because it's going down, we use a negative. Its rise is negative 11, and its run is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Its run is 6. So this slope FC is equal to negative 11 over 6, which is what, about almost negative 2. It's a very steep slope. Let's look at this slope here, maybe from E to A. What would that slope be? It's a downhill slope. It's got a rise of 1, 2. So slope EA has negative 2 for the rise, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, plus 6 for the run. So it's negative 1 over 3 when we reduce it to its smallest form. Now, I know we're running out of time. I'm just going to go through how we use the formula for slope, but keep in mind this idea of rise over run. So the slope of the line joining 2 points. So let's take the ones we did over here. So we had F and E first of all, and that was F was minus 3, 4, and E was minus 1, 8. We'll do that one. And then we had FC, which was minus 3, 4 for F, and C was 3, minus 7. Let's do these two first, and then we'll see if we need to do another example. So again, you're given the formula. So the slope formula is basically telling you how to work out rise over run. But what we do is, if you notice when we did the rise, we were looking at the up and down movement, which is all along the y-axis. Okay, so it's what happens on the y-axis compared to what happens going along, which is on the x-axis. So our slope formula is y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. Now some of you might want to just get going now and do that yourself while I'm working away here, or some of you might just want to listen, so I'm happy with either. Let's do FE first of all. F is minus 3, 4, so we'll call it x1, y1. E is minus 1, 8, we'll call it x2, y2. Remember, every point has an x and a y, and the same little number has to be with the same point. So these are both 1s, these are both 2s. My slope is going to be y2, which is 8, minus y1, which is 4, divided by x2, which is minus 1, minus 3, which is x1. It doesn't matter which point you choose to be x1, y1, and which point you choose to be x2, y2. It doesn't matter. You'll get the same answer either way. Okay? So maybe over here I'll put them the other way around. So here, 8 minus 4 is 4. Minus 1 minus 3 is minus 1 plus 3. So 4 over 2, which is 2. So the slope of FE is 2. Now if we went back here, you can see that's what we found already. Slope FE, rise over run, is 2. So that's correct. Let's take our second one. And this time I'm going to do it the other way around. I'm going to call this one x1, y1, and this one x2, y2. Just so you can see it doesn't matter which way around it is. So my slope again is y2 minus y1, 4 minus 7 over x2 minus x1 minus 3 minus 3. 4 minus 7 is plus 7, so 4 plus 7 over minus 6, which is 11 over minus 6. And what we have there is that our slope is 11 over minus 6. Now with the negative slopes, that's the same slope as negative 11 over plus 6. They're the same slope. So slope FC is at minus 11 over 6. Slope FE was 2. Okay, we actually do have a few minutes left. We have 8 minutes left. Does anybody have any questions they'd like to ask me about slope? or about midpoint? So just look at it for a minute. I'm going to give you a question to do now in a moment. So I'll write the question down here while you're thinking about if you've got any questions for me. Have a look at the slope formula there. Okay, here's two questions you could try, and then I'll work them through in a moment on the screen. First question is, find the midpoint of the line joining 7 minus 4 and 210. And the second question is, find the slope of the line joining 312 and 112. Okay, so have a go at those two questions. We have 7 minutes left or 6 minutes left until the end of the class. So try those and then you can compare your answers to my answers. So don't forget to label your points. Make sure you write down the formula, that you substitute the points into the formula, and that you get your answer. And your answer for midpoint will be a point. Your answer for the slope will be a fraction or a whole number. Now, some of you will want to do that in your head. You'll want to do the midpoint in your head, and that's completely fine. Just for now, I'd like you to make sure you know how to use the formula would be useful. But if you want to do it in your head, you can. It's always better to show some work, so that if you make a slip, you can get credit for what you've done right. So I'm going to work through these quietly without chat on the screen, and you can see how you get on. So hopefully for the midpoint question, you got an answer something like this. Well, not just something like this, but this answer. If you didn't, please ask me and I'll try and explain why. Or maybe you can see where you went wrong. And I'll do the second one now, which is the slope. So for the slope, hopefully you've got an answer of -5/4. -10/8 isn't wrong as an answer. It's just we tend to give our answers in their most simplest form. And if you remember with fractions, we give it in the most simplest form as any answers that we give there. Now, I actually I meant to bring my calculator in here. But anyway, just to say, at this stage, make sure you're becoming familiar with the calculators. Do you all know how to do fractions on your calculator? Or do you want me to get my calculator quickly and go through that with you? Anybody like me to go through fractions on calculator? Yeah, okay, let me just run and get my calculator. I'll be back in 1 minute. I'm in the middle of a call game to my class. Okay, so hopefully you have your calculator in front of you. Now, fractions are probably the thing that's the hardest. If you get your calculator there, I'll have to just tilt it like this so with the light you can see it. So let's just go through some of these buttons that are handy. There's a handy button, x cubed. That means a number multiplied by itself and by itself again. So let's look up, for instance, 10 cubed. How would I do that? I'd put in 10. It comes up as 10 on the screen, and then I press that button, and you can see the little power of 3 there, which means 10 by 10 by 10, which is 1,000. So let's see what we get. Yeah, 1,000. We've got a fraction button we'll come to now in a second. The square root of a button, the square root of a number. So say I want to know the square root of 81. I would press that button, put in 81, and I get 9. The cube root I wouldn't worry about too much. X squared, so what's a number squared? Let's say 15 squared. I do it like that and I get 225. I wouldn't worry too much about these. You won't really need them just now. And you can't use these for algebra, so don't be trying to put x squared into your calculator by x cubed into your calculator. You can't use it for algebra. It's really only for arithmetic or coordinate geometry, coordinates or whatever. Don't worry about this row here. We'll come back to this another time. Don't worry about this row here. The brackets are handy for BIMDAS. BOMDAS. So say I want to do 9 times 8, and then I want to put that in a bracket. So do you see how I did that? I pressed the bracket, I did 9 times 8, close the bracket. This button here we'll look at now in a second when we come to talk about fractions. That changes your answers from fractions to decimals and decimals to fractions. So say we had a question on adding. Let's write it down here where you can see. So let's see whether you can do this question. If we have 3/4 plus 2/5, and you wanted to do that on your calculator. Now, ideally you'd be doing that in your head and doing it on paper, but for now we're going to assume that you're going to use your calculator for work in the exam. So 3/4 plus 2/5. So you have your calculator. Make sure it's clear by pressing AC. Okay, let's get this a bit higher so you can see the whole calculator. So we've got 3/4. How do I do that? I press this button here, and if you notice, a fraction comes up with a rectangle above it, the line, and a rectangle below the line. So 3/4 would be 3, and then use the arrow key 4. Do you see the way it's 3/4 now? Can you see that? And then plus 2/5. So I use the arrow key to go up again, so they now know I'm on to the next part of the question, plus, and then I do fraction button again, and it's 2/5, and I do the arrow key again. So make sure you can do that on your calculator. If I press equals, it gives me the answer down here as 23/20, 23/20. Now, just to check, if I wanted to know what that was as a decimal, I can press SD, and that changes to a decimal for me. It's 1.15. If I press it again, it goes back to a fraction. Okay, So say I wanted to do 5/7 times 9/13. Okay, so 5/7 times 9/13. Again, I put that fraction button 5/7 times fraction button 9/13, and that gives me 45/91. Just make sure your mics are muted, okay, because I'm hearing a little bit of noise. Make sure your mic is muted. So 45/91. Now, the harder ones are the ones with things like 3 2/5 plus 7 5/8. So how do we do that in our calculator? So 3 2/5. Do you see above that fraction button, there's the yellow fraction button. If you do shift and that button, you can now see you've got a new display that tells you a whole number place and then a fraction place. So 3 2/5, you do 3 and 2/5. Do you see that I navigated around using the arrow buttons here? Plus 7 5/8 will be shift and that button 7 and 5/8 equals 441 over 40. Yeah, now if I want to have that, that's a top-heavy improper fraction, isn't it? If I want it in a mixed fraction, I can do shift and this button, and it changes it into a mixed fraction for me. So let me show you how to do that again. So this is what it is at present, 441 over 40. If I do shift and that button, it's 11 1/40. Okay, so hopefully that's clear then on the fraction buttons. Those are probably the ones that you'll want to use most. Any questions about that? Okay, so what we'll do is we'll have another class. Oh yeah, go ahead. Yeah. No questions. Okay. So what we'll do is we'll have another class this time next week, and you can ask me any questions that have come up during the revision classes during the week. I'll be posting work each day for you to revise from. It's up to you to choose whether you use that to revise from, or whether you use the textbook, your own work from the textbook, or whatever it is that you choose to do. Okay, but I'll help you to restructure your revision at least so you're doing some revision each day. And please don't get stressed about these exams. We won't be using these exams or these assessments or tests, whatever you like to say. We won't be using these to decide by themselves whether you do higher level or ordinary level next year. Okay, so if any of you are thinking that maths is really hard and you want to move to ordinary level, that'll be fine. I'll be talking with your parents about that. So please don't get anxious about these tests. Just do your best in them. Do whatever you can. And if you have any questions during the week, get in touch with me. Okay? So take care. Have a lovely weekend. Stay safe. And I'll talk to you soon. Bye. Bye.